Last week we were talking about 17th century Dutch art, and I've continued the theme today. But I was saying that 17th century Dutch art was quite often the pieces were quite often quite small for domestic use, because there was a really buoyant market amongst sort of middle classes who had an inordinate amount of money at that time to purchase luxury goods. And so many paintings like the Vermeer that we looked at last week were small, great to go in into private homes. Quite often they were of domestic scenes. But there are always, in any given trend, a few people that buck the trend. Rubens was one in the 17th century, Flemish artist, but I'm kind of not counting him because he was away very often. He travelled an awful lot. Rembrandt, though, was the other one. Rembrandt was absolutely steeped in Dutch culture. He didn't travel very much at all, if at all. He lived in Amsterdam for most of his adult life. So whilst everybody else was painting, girls by virginals or reading letters in little interiors, Rembrandt was painting works like this one. It is an interior. It's definitely not your normal scene. This is Belshazzar's Feast. It is in the National Gallery. The dates are sort of 1636 to 1638. So obviously not entirely sure when he completed it. It's in the National Gallery, and it's a big old painting. So if you were going to have this in your home, you would need to have a big old home or a big new home. So this is just over 2 meters by about 1 meter, almost 1 meter 70. And it's opulent. It's a scene from the Old Testament. There's quite a bit going on, which I will explain, of course. But kind of the first thing that I see after I've kind of got past the light and the sort of the textures, which again I'll come back to, is this guy who is it's almost a study in surprise or shock. So this guy in the centre is Balthazar. It's not Balthazar. I keep wanting to say Balthazar. It's Belshazzar. So I kind of think Belshazzar. It's Belshazzar, and he has been very surprised, quite obviously, by this writing on the wall, and he has just stood up from the table, knocking over. Let's go. Oh no, you can't see. Let's see if you can. Yeah, no. Where is he? Knocking over this this vessel as he does so. And he's like, I love the way that he's twisted his head round. His eyes are nearly popping out of his head, and he's holding up his hand or up his arm as though to sort of protect himself, because he's not entirely sure what is going on, of course, as probably are you at this precise moment. So what is going on? Let's come back to the full scene. It's not a study of shock, although it could be. This is a scene from the Old Testament I mentioned, and it's the painting is called Belshazzar's Feast. Now, Belshazzar was the king of Babylon, and his dad had been a naughty boy. His dad had stolen some vessels from the Temple of Jerusalem. At Jerusalem. And Belshazzar had followed in his father's footsteps and also been a very naughty boy, because he used these vessels at a feast that he was giving. So this is what's going on here. So he's using these sacred vessels. So he's causing committing a sacrilegious act by using these vessels at this feast. So the feast was for 1,000 of his lords, but Rembrandt has very sensibly just focused in on this particular scene, this moment of really high drama when Belshazzar has seen this writing behind him. And by the way, yes, this is exactly where writing on the wall comes from. So he has seen this writing behind him, and he is shocked, he's surprised. You know what? Maybe he's thinking, oh my goodness, I know that I'm not supposed to be using this tableware, these vessels at this feast. Ooh, maybe he's getting a bit of a bad feeling, as he should be. So he's seen this writing on the wall, and he might have a bad feeling, but he doesn't know what this writing says. He asks many people to translate the writing. It is in a version, I think, of Hebrew. Nobody can translate the writing until he comes to a prophet called Daniel, and this is all kind of within a few hours. This all happens very quickly, and Daniel translates the writing for Belshazzar, and he says, I don't know exactly what he said as his preamble, but I think he can't have wanted to deliver this message because the writing says that Belshazzar has been weighed in the balance and he has been found wanting. Within just a few hours of finding out what this message, this writing on the wall says, Belshazzar was dead. So, a cautionary tale: do not use sacred vessels from the Temple of Jerusalem, even if they were stolen by your dad and thought to have been in his possession. What I love about this painting, so, as I said, loads of artists were operating in the Netherlands at this point, most of them doing little domestic scenes. Rembrandt has chosen this extraordinary, opulent and grandiose scene, but really I think it is a vehicle for him to show off. So he was about 30 when he painted this, and a very, very crowded art market, but he wanted to show that he could A, really capture a moment of drama within a narrative, which I think he does wonderfully, but B, he's showing off all sorts of textures and different fabrics and so on. I mean, just look at, Rachel's joined, hello Rachel. Just look at his costume. This difference of materials, the brocade, which is it looks like gold and silver threads, the chain, the jewels, this fantastic turban, this huge turban with this teeny tiny little crown on the top of it. It's all just brilliantly depicted. He's used a lot of lead tin yellow for on the brocade, and also for the writing on the wall. He's also, what Rembrandt did was he would mix his pigments with things like ground up chalk or sometimes ground up sand, and he would mix this all together with the binding agent, which in this case is oil, to create different textures as well. But notoriously, Rembrandt never wanted anybody to get too close to his paintings, because then he knew that would ruin the illusion. They're much better viewed from a bit of a distance, as are many works of art. If you go and have a look at a Monet in the National Gallery or anywhere else, you get up close and you could not discern at all what that painting would be, and then you move back and you can see it, of course. So fabrics, textures, he's also done fabrics. He's a clever boy here. He's done fabric wet and dry. So this lady is she's so shocked, or possibly, in fact, she's actually just trying to avoid his left arm that has shot up in shock, trying to protect himself. This very natural reaction, but then she's kind of also reacting as she's moved over, and I think that she's poured what is supposed to be wine, I think, but kind of looks remarkably like water to me. So, kind of a feast is he giving? I mean, this is terrible. But she's poured it, if you notice, over the arm of her dress. And just look at that. I mean, look at the way that her body has been depicted. It's an unusual pose. I wouldn't fancy being the model that modelled for that and had to sit in that pose for quite some time. Yeah, and the lights just on her décolletage and on the back of her neck, it's brilliant. So different materials. He's also depicted very lovingly the tableware. Notice that Belshazzar, this hand that you can see on the salver, which is in the middle of the table, that is Belshazzar's hand. So, and he's knocking over this other goblet of, again, it's supposed to be wine, I think, but that looks a bit like water to me. Rubbish feast, if you ask me. So tableware, though, right in the centre, and his hand is on it, beautifully depicted, but also just highlighting the fact that this has caused all of the kerfuffle, to use a word that is a British understatement, I think. So this tableware has caused all the kerfuffle in the first place. Interesting too that both of the goblets are spilling water, so obviously they've both been knocked over, but just given the fact that Belshazzar's life is about to be ended, so life spilled, I think that resonates quite nicely as well. I'm enjoying as well. Look at these. Look at this reaction here. This couple. Now, what I think is really interesting in this work, as well as all these, all this talent that he's demonstrating, is that I'm not entirely sure. I'm just going to go back to the main painting. I'm not entirely sure, in fact, that any of the other people in the work have really, they might have noticed the writing on the wall, but I don't think they're as upset by it as Belshazzar is, because it would seem to me that what they're looking at is him. I think that they are reacting to his reaction. The girl spilling the wine on her sleeve, not sure where she's looking, but I'm kind of thinking that she's looking at Belshazzar. Definitely this couple here are looking at him rather than looking at the writing on the wall. So that's another great little detail. They're looking askance, but they might not be entirely sure what they're askance, what they're looking askance for or about. So they're a great little duo. This lady with her pearls a bit skew-whiff is in fact very probably Rembrandt's wife, Saskia, that she modelled for this. And then we have another couple of people in the work. You can see the back of a head here of a very well-dressed lady with this lovely pearl earring and her feathered headdress. She is potentially a courtesan, which I think is possibly maligning her, but I don't think she's looking at the writing on the wall, or indeed at Belshazzar either. She is looking, I think, at this slightly ghostly figure at the back of a little boy who's playing a recorder. And that possibly they're exchanging glances, that he's perhaps looking back at her. It's been suggested that maybe he is sort of an angel who is sort of one of God's agents watching over things. It's a bit... I know that he's supposed to be an angel, but the thought of somebody watching over things in that manner, playing a recorder, is a bit strange, isn't it? The whole thing, though, is brought together with this fantastic use of light. I mentioned it on the lady to the left's décolletage and on the back of her neck and her shoulder. It's it's just, it's brilliant, a brilliant use of light. Kind of here it's a bit yellow and eerie, but it really brings the whole painting together, as does this use of light and dark. He was very influenced by Caravaggio, was Rembrandt. So the daring to have this black background, of course, on which the writing on the wall stands out even more prominently. So there we go. So Rembrandt's Belshazzar's Feast dates to the 1630s. In fact, just at the time that we had that they had tulip mania. So just to kind of put things in context, that's what Rembrandt was doing at that time. I'm going to turn comments back on. And just see what you thought of that one. Can I just do this? I don't know. Can I do that? No, that's it. No. Oh. I can't turn the I've got a little bar along the bottom of my my phone. Oh, good. Oh, thank you. Some thumbs up, So when you next go in the National Gallery, this is actually in Christine Wiley Art Centre requested to be in my live video. Have you just pressed a button by mistake, Christine, or did you mean that? So when you go into the National Gallery, this Rembrandt is in a room, I think they call it 17th century innovations. So it's it's kind of not widely, but it's considered to be something that was quite innovative of its time. I mean, Rembrandt just... who's the figure holding the writing? Well, probably God. It's probably God's hand. There's nobody actually writing. It's a disembodied hand. Sorry if I didn't say that. But it's probably God's hand. It's probably God's message. I think I had a similar plot once. I hope you didn't have a similar dinner party. And if you did have a similar dinner party, at least I hope you were serving wine and not water. And I hope that you weren't... Oh, oops, great, Jess, you didn't mean to join. You'd be really welcome to. Yes, I hope that no one wrote on the wall. That could be a dinner party that got well out of hand if a disembodied hand or somebody else's hand started to write on your wall. That wouldn't be marvellous, would it? So thank you very much for listening today. I think Thursday, I'm just going to kind of continue a little bit with Dutch art and talk a bit about Vanitas, but I think I might start way back and talk about Memento Mori and how that sort of morphed into Vanitas paintings. So paintings that remind you that you're going to die, which sounds a bit morbid, and to some people's mind it might be, but actually it's really interesting and quite often quite funny as well. So I think that's what I'm going to do on Thursday. Today I will be filming my next Pepped Up by Paintings, so there'll be another one coming out on Saturday, and that's going to be Rousseau's Surprised, so quite a big departure from what I've been doing. And what else? I don't know, there's probably lots of other things, but I'll let you go. Have a good day, everybody. See you soon. Bye.